Good evening, Malaysia, and followers from around the world. We are pleased to have with us tonight Mr. Yusuf Hashim, an adventurer, a photographer, a writer, but simply an extraordinary Malaysian. He has traveled to 143 countries and counting if it was not for COVID-19. He has driven across Africa 4 times, and he has driven from Malaysia to London many times. He has sailed to the Antarctica and much more. Tonight, we will hear from him directly. What has it been like for him? And of course, we know that we have heard so much about Yusuf Hashim. We have read about him. We have also watched him talking over social media. But Mr. Yusuf, I will need to recap and ask you some same questions again, okay?
Yep.
About how you started, and more importantly, when you were the CEO of Shell Chemicals, or sorry, the managing director of Shell Chemicals. At what point did you felt that, look, I'm sick and tired of corporate life. I'm really can't take this anymore. I've got to give it up and walk out of this room, say goodbye to the directors, and move on with something much more interesting. Let's do a recap, sir.
Okay. For me, retiring early wasn't really a spur of the moment decision. Since my mid 40s,
Okay.
I have actually been thinking about moving on and doing something else for a long, long time. You see, life has got three phases. I mean, you have the education phase, the work phase, and the retirement phase. Most people, including me, work like crazy during the work phase of our life, and we sacrifice everything
Yeah.
to get ahead in our career. Around our mid 40s, most of us would be more or less, we would more or less know the trajectory of our careers, where we are going and whether we are successful or not successful. For me, I was appointed managing director of Shell Chemicals sometime in my early 40s. So by that measure, I thought my trajectory was on the right track. And when you become successful in your career, you then begin to think, what is the meaning of life?
Yeah.
We ask ourselves, what do we want out of life? What is life all about? So we start thinking about these things. I mean, is there nothing more to life than simply work, 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 work? So in the early, in the late 80s, when I was in my early 40s, I came across a study by Boeing, which said that there is an inverse relationship between the age at which you retire and the length of life that you have after retirement. Yeah, the study said that the later you retire, the shorter will be the your life after retirement. So I thought, and the statistics, I can show you the slides, that if you retire at 65, the study showed that by 68, you would die.
Okay.
Seriously, that's what the study said. Boeing did it, and they actually measured or counted the number of checks and studied the number of checks that they gave to their staff as pensions. And they found that after 68, many of the staff died, and they did the study. And if people who retire earlier at about, let's say, 50 or 55, they would live until about 80. So here I was in my 40s, and I was thinking along the lines that I should be retiring about 55 instead of 65, which was the norm at that time,
Yeah.
So that's what made me think seriously about retiring. And then in the late 90s, the world financial crisis came about.
Yes.
Many companies were restructuring, right sizing, downsizing, and I was in the part of the group that was doing this exercise, and I began to notice, I saw what a fantastic package that they were giving to staff to make them retire, you see. So I look at my situation and I said to myself, my daughter has just graduated. No more, having to pay a lot of money for her fees. I'm more or less at the peak of my career. And the thing that really clinched the thing was in 1999, when I decided to opt for early retirement, the government changed the system of paying tax from paying in arrears to paying in advance. So technically, whatever you achieve, you receive in 1969, there would be no tax, you see.
Yeah.
So it was a no-brainer. I would get more money by leaving than if I were to work and pay tax. So the retirement age, official retirement age at that time was 55. I was 53. So I had 2 more years to real retirement. And here they are offering me 2 years of salary and in a tax-free year, which means if I work for 2 years, I would get a salary minus tax. But if I retire now, I would get the whole amount without working. Yeah. So it was a no-brainer.
Yes.
So I decided to retire.
I mean that this was you already thinking about it in the 40s, and then when the financial crisis happened, I believe that you were actually planning the restructuring and doing the layoff to these guys, right? Yes. And that obviously that you were looking at the golden handshake and was waiting for your turn when you will get this golden handshake. And of course, the tax system came into place where people had to pay tax before they actually earn it. Okay. Now, of course, you were based in Europe. You did a lot of this business traveling. The airport must have been almost like a place for you to go all the time. Now, you were using the airport, traveling around Europe for work. Did you at any point when you were at the airport actually say that, I wish I was going to some place exotic instead of just sitting on there waiting for my flight to take off?
Not really, because when I was working, I was actually like many of us. We give our heart and our soul and our time and our attention fully to work. But what I'd like to say is that many people think that jet setting is actually glamorous, but actually after a while, it's very, very boring and tiresome because you think you get to travel to Brazil, to New Zealand, to China, to Japan, to attend all these kind of meetings and all that. Because I was a manager, I was a trader, a manager of styrenics, international trader of styrenics when I was in the UK. So I get to travel a lot of places. So traveling here and there and staying in hotels and attending meetings and all that. Eventually, you get tired of it all, because you tend to see that, what is there? You don't actually get to see the place. You go to let's say you go to Japan, you attend a meeting. The meeting is in the hotel or in the office. You come back and straight away you have to rush back to your office. So for a while, initially it was interesting, but eventually it got a bit boring and tiresome. So the other thing I noticed that when I was in the UK, that a company like Shell could really get rid of a lot of their senior staff there, the very senior staff, very senior executives in the head office actually spend their whole life sitting in meetings and, listening to their own voices,
Yeah, you're right.
So I felt, that these people are not adding value to the company. The making of the money was actually in the operating companies in Malaysia, in Australia, in Singapore, in Japan, wherever it was. And these people at head office were just, having a ball of a time, talking to each other, creating work, but not adding real value to the company. So I felt that, many of these people could be actually removed without any effect on the bottom line. And sure enough, because during this restructuring, we had a 32-story building next to the London Wheel that was our head office. For the last 15, 20 years, they have actually got rid of almost more than half of the staff in the head office, from a building with 32 stories. We now occupy maybe about 14 stories, and the other 10 or 15 have been rented out. So you see, this was coming. I knew, because these people were, when times are good, they just collect the money, the dividends, and pay themselves because The Shell system is that most of the multinationals, you work in
true.
an operating company outside of the head office, and then you get promoted to your level of incompetence. Let's say the chairman. The chairman then moves back to the head office. There is no job for him there.
Yeah.
So imagine all the chairmen from all the operating companies all over the world going back to the office, to the head office.
Yeah.
They got no job actually. So they create
Right.
jobs for themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, there are people who are actually doing real work, making
Yes.
policies and that kind of thing. But most of these others really don't have any real work to do. So I felt that if I were to come to that stage, in life, I would be very guilty,
Yes.
So I was a bit disillusioned with the corporate structure, that I felt that a lot of the employees within a company, a multinational like Shell, could get rid of maybe 1/3 of their staff, and still the bottom line would not suffer. And indeed, these days, today, they have been doing that, So I was one of the people who were lucky enough to be given the opportunity to take whatever they were giving. And I think they were a bit silly because many of the people that they got rid of because of this restructuring, within a couple of months, found a job. Many of them were recruited by Petronas. I was offered a job in Petronas, but unfortunately, I couldn't take it because they had the fine print in my stock options that says that you can work anywhere, but you cannot work in a competing oil company, because if you do, all your stock options become null and void. So
conflict of interest.
Yes. So I decided that, okay, I will not work, And, retiring before your time is due can be quite traumatic, Many people retire, or if they are forced to retire, especially if you volunteer to retire, it's different. But if you're forced to retire because of circumstances, it can be quite traumatic because, you suddenly, when you're out there, you suddenly realize that, hey, my whole identity is my company, I'm the managing director, and people, invite me to dinners and kowtow to me, it's because of my job, not because of myself. So this kind of realization that your whole ecosystem around you, your whole support structure, all the people around you, really, they were actually serving or kowtowing or paying homage to your chair and not to you.
Yes.
So if you are not prepared, and people who are forced to retire, for example, or they retire at the mandatory retirement age, will come to this traumatic experience, So you need to be well prepared. Luckily for me, even in my 40s, I already had a lot of friends outside. I was very much involved in motorcycling. I had a lot of friends who were doing 4x4, going to neighboring countries. I was interested in computers. I was interested in photography, So when I retired, I had things to do. In fact, I had a huge bucket list that I wanted to tick, So for me, retirement was a godsend, I never felt any loss at all, And when I felt that, did I do the right decision? And I remind myself, I got 24 months of salary in the bank because they gave that to me for opting to retire. And now I'm free to do whatever I want to do, So that's my my take on this retirement thing,
So you really have friends that you could spend your time with who share similar hobbies, not those business friends who are suddenly not available for you or for me for business lunch, or suddenly it says that, oh, I'm busy, I've got no time for you. Real friends. When you retired, finally you retired, you walk away, and you had your pile of money there. What were the countries that you chose to travel?
I joined, actually, the moment I retired. I actually joined up with this worldexplorer.com. They are specialists in arranging for transcontinental motoring adventures. Big boys with big toys. That sort of thing. They buy a Land Cruiser, and they'd like to drive to Africa, drive to London, that kind of thing. So worldexplorer.com were specialists in this. They arranged this kind of trips.
Okay.
So Thomas Fu, my good friend, headed this organization, and I offered him my services as a photographer and as a driver in return for subsidized travel. You see? So, I shot pictures for them for free, but
Okay.
in return, I got to drive their cars. And, I drive with them all over the world. I mean, I visited almost 130 countries with them. I drove from London to Malaysia maybe 3 times, from Istanbul to Kuala Lumpur a couple of times, around Africa, around South America, So my travels in the initial part was actually quite highly subsidized by this work I was doing for them, So that helped to conserve my little pile of cash. So that was how I started, So, and for example, they say, hey, next month we are going to India. We're going to drive to India. Yeah, let's go.
So,
So when you're retired, you can do that. But if you're working, you can't, you've got to take leave and that sort of thing. Yeah.
tell me about your trip to driving across Africa. Where do you start and where did it ended?
Okay. To drive from, I've driven from Cape Town to Cairo, and from Cairo across the Sahara Desert to Casablanca. And to do that, what we do is we ship our cars to Cape Town.
Okay.
And then from there, we will drive up. Where there are hotels, we sleep in hotels, but usually there are none, so we camp. So from Cape Town, we drove all the way through Namibia, to Botswana, to Malawi, through Tanzania, Kenya, and then Ethiopia and Sudan, and up to Egypt. And then from Egypt, we drove across the Sahara Desert, but it was not in one trip. So one trip was, in fact, I did several trips with worldexplorer.net. The first one was from Cape Town to Mombasa, and then the second one was from Cape Town to Cairo, and the third one was another route through Namibia and coming back into Botswana, and then across to Malawi and up north to Khartoum. So I did a series of short trips, and I joined the Petronas adventure team. And they were the ones that wanted to drive from Khartoum across the Sahara Desert to Casablanca, you see. So each of these kind of trips maybe takes a couple of months, or sometimes 3 months, So you need to have a lot of time to be able to do this, and not only time, to get away from home.
Yes.
For this amount of period, so.
And some of these trips were done much earlier in your life when there was still no Wi-Fi, right?
Yes, those days there were Wi-Fi from about 2012 to 2013, 15. So when you are out there, you're actually out of touch with your house, with your home, and only when you get to a major town that you can use the phone to get in touch. So for all intents and purposes, in the early stages, in the 2001 to 2008, that kind of thing, there was no contact. So you really have to have a very, very understanding spouse to be able to do this kind of thing,
Yes.
And you must have in you the determination to this kind of thing.
Because making those telephone calls from the hotels were really, really expensive.
Yes.
Unlike you, I've had my experience in Africa. I really like Africa. Okay, I've started from South Africa all the way to Sudan, Khartoum. I've done Zimbabwe, Zambia, Senegal, and like you, I'm really fascinated by Africa. But there's one country I really want to go. I had booked my ticket, but because of COVID-19, my ticket is left hanging there. And we're talking about Ethiopia. You have shown me all those fantastic pictures about Ethiopia. And since the day you told me about Ethiopia at our nasi lemak breakfast, it has never got off my mind. Okay, now tell me about Ethiopia, because now I can just what I call it, crave away. Tell me about your trips to Ethiopia.
To me, Ethiopia is the jewel of Africa. Many people have not heard of Ethiopia, but Ethiopia is really fascinating. There are many things that makes it so. For example, it is in Ethiopia that the first upright walking hominids originated. You and I and everybody else in the world are related through our common great ad infinitum grandmother, because Lucy, the remains of Lucy, which was the first upright walking hominid, was actually discovered in Ethiopia. In a place called the Awash Valley in the Danakil Depression. So from there, it seems that was 3.5 million years ago. Her bones have been carbon dated to be about 3.5 million years ago. So the archaeologists and the historians and the scientists have established that humankind started from Ethiopia, and from there 3 strands or 3 streams went all over the place. One stream went to the right and became the Mongoloids to the northeast. Another one went to the northwest and became the Caucasians. Another one went down and became the Negroids. So from there, they then intermix all over the place. Another one from the part of the Mongoloid came down towards India and became the Dravidians. So we all of us originated from Ethiopia. It is the tree where man was born. So you must go there and go and see the place where you started, where your ancestors are, So you can see Lucy's bones in the Addis Ababa Museum, And then Ethiopia is such a fantastic, fascinating place, because in Ethiopia there are about 50 to 60 tribes, and many of these were only discovered sometime about 50, 40 years ago, and they have been living like what they've been living over the centuries, even today, I've got pictures to show you what they do. For example, they have fascinating customs like Mingi, for example. It's a cruel custom. They believe that if a child, they condone sex outside marriage, but if a child comes out of that union, then the child is killed, because in a custom called Mingi, they stuff the mouth of the baby with clay, and they leave the baby out in the bush to die. And they also say that if the baby is left to join the community, they'll bring bad luck to the community. And again, they've got such silly beliefs. Like, for example, if you've got a cleft lip, if a child has got a cleft lip, they are also killed by this custom called Mingi. If the bottom teeth were to grow out first instead of the top, for example, also killed. And there is also a tribe that also eats dead bodies, cannibalism, and many of them, the Suris, for example, the Mursis, walk around stark naked, and they got strange customs. For example, when in the rite of passage from childhood to adulthood, they have got to go through a custom where they jump over cows naked, and then their female relatives offer themselves to be whipped.
I see.
And the more scars you got from the whipping, the higher the your status in their tribe and in their community. So this kind of customs are fantastic. You've got to go there to see them. I mean, when you go there, you are in your bush jacket and your hat and all that, and you are the strange one, because they are walking around stark naked. And you think they are strange, but actually from their point of view, you are the strange one. So I think Ethiopia has got so many of these fascinating things for you to go and see. For example, there is a place in Ethiopia called I mentioned just now, the Danakil Depression. There are volcanoes in there. The world's Africa's most active volcano is in the Danakil Depression. You can actually climb that volcano, but the conditions are so bad that you have to only climb it at night, because in the daytime the temperature goes up to 57 degrees, and there are tribes living down there below the volcano mining salt, and they've been there for hundreds of years. So at night the temperature goes down to about 47 Celsius. Then you can climb, but then you got to go down again before it gets sunlight comes out again. And in the daytime the temperature is 57. And these salt miners mine salt there and take it out on the backs of donkeys or camels, and they've been doing that for the last hundreds of years. So these places are fascinating for you to go and see, you see. And there is another town, for example, in the north of Ethiopia called Lalibela, in Lalibela, there are 14 rock-hewn churches,
Yes.
hewn by hand out of solid rock in the side of the mountain. There are 14 of them. And I mean, you should go and see this. It's about 1,000 years old, And if you go to the west, for example, no, this way is the east, a place called Hara. The attraction there is that Hara is the fourth most holy city for Muslims in the world, after Mecca, Medina, and so on. So number 4 is Hara in Ethiopia. It's a 14 square kilometer city, walled, and there you can go and see the hyena men, and they feed hyenas mouth to mouth, because it seems in their history, hyenas used to steal their livestock and kill their children. So they made a pact, that if we feed you every night, then you don't come and attack us or kill our livestock, So they did. And they've been doing this for the last few hundred years, And there's a family, incidentally, the chief at that time, who was the head of this family, was also called Yusuf. That's why I got along quite well with him. So I've got pictures. I can show you pictures of hyenas being fed mouth to mouth by these people, by this particular family, and they've been doing it. And it is not something for the tourists, because whether there are tourists or not, every night at about 8 or 7:30, they will go under this special tree, and they will call the hyenas by name.
Wow.
And 30 or 40 of these wild hyenas will come out,
Yeah.
and this hyena man will feed them. So these are things that you can see in Ethiopia. And also, Ethiopia is the seat of the African Union, the headquarters of the African Union is there.
Yes.
Almost every other country in Africa has been colonized, except Ethiopia.
Wow.
But sadly, this last few months, there's been some trouble in the northern part of Ethiopia.
It is
If
Tiare,
you
right?
read the newspapers, Tingre and all that, So
Now, those areas which have been affected by the civil war, what are the areas of attractions which is now difficult for tourists to go because of the civil war?
I think Tingre is somewhere in the north, and that is where places like Lalibela are.
Oh.
And if you want to cross Ethiopia, you need to pass the north,
Okay.
So it's not quite safe if there is trouble, because last time when we were crossing Kenya, Kenya were having their elections, and it was quite violent. There were demonstrations, there were quite a few rebels and so on. So our convoy was passing Kenya to go up to Ethiopia, and we were stopped. They burnt tires and blocked the road,
See.
But in situations like this, all they want, you can settle it by just giving money, So we paid a couple of $1,000 US and they let the entire convoy go through, you see. So these are some of the excitement of doing Africa.
What is that sulphuric acid lake that I think you went to? With all this yellow sulfur coming out, right? What's the name of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the picture, and it's part of the Danakil Depression.
Okay.
The Danakil Depression is actually a very low area below the level of the Red Sea, and because it's below the level of the Red Sea, the seawater seeps in and goes down into the Danakil Depression. Eventually, maybe a few thousand years from today, it'll be a lake. So that forms the salt, and these people then mine the salt. And this is part of the Rift Valley, the Great Rift Valley of Africa. One arm goes towards the Arabian Gulf, the other one is the Red Sea, and the Y, the main stem of the Rift Valley, goes through Kenya, through Tanzania, and that's where you get all the Great Lakes. So along these fault lines are the volcanoes. So the Danakil Depression has got this a series of volcanoes. The one with the sulfur is called the Dalol volcano, and the one that is the most active in Africa is the Ertaale volcano. These are the pictures, and you can climb these things. and you can go and walk into the sulfuric acid, because you have to be careful, because birds, they think that they're water, they try and drink this thing, and then you find a lot of their carcasses around the area, you see, because it's sulfuric acid, it's sulfur, and mixed with water or steam, it becomes sulfuric acid.
Yeah.
So fascinating, I tell you, Ethiopia by itself is worth visiting,
And a lot of
never get tired of Ethiopia.
a lot of Malaysians are not aware that there's a direct flight from Kuala Lumpur to Addis Ababa
Yes.
before the closure. Okay, now,
Yes.
but in those areas that you mentioned, the sulfuric lake and the volcano, even before the civil war, it was already becoming more difficult to go. They had classified it as a security area where there was this potential of tourists being kidnapped. So you have been really, really lucky to be able to explore these places. Now, I'm also fascinated because that when you travel to these areas where I've seen many of these naked boys running around in Ethiopia, this nomadic life, were there any women travelers with you who might have been quite embarrassed or surprised by these boys?
No, I
boys
think
running around.
when you go to Africa, I mean, this kind of things are expected. I mean, I have pictures of these people, the Mursis, the what do you call it, the Suris, to the west of the Omo Valley, on the left hand side bank of the Omo Valley. There's one group of people from the Awash Valley that actually went there, So the civilization there is about 200,000 years, and they are about 7 feet tall, Many of them are about 6 feet 5, 7 feet tall, and they're giants, and their skin is so black it is almost blue. Now, I have pictures, but I dare not show them because it might bring or give all Malaysians a huge inferiority complex. A 7 foot tall negroid, bluish person, with his manhood almost reaching his knee.
So they were literally gigantic in every sense.
Yes. And this tribe, this tribe there is supposed to be after the Awash Valley, they went there, and human beings, most of them actually came from here. This Omo Valley to the west,
Okay.
So there you are. I don't know, when we migrated to China and to Malaysia, I think we shrunk.
Yusuf, that in these travels, of course, that it's also not just looking at places of interest, but it's also about people. That I think that's really important to understand people's culture and that to appreciate their way of living, which is different, but does not mean that they're inferior to ours. Sometimes Malaysians are very judgmental. They judge you from your religious point of view, from the way you live your life, the way you dress. Now, when you go to these places, how do they? What hits you the most? Like, look, this woman is topless. He's walking around naked. Who are we to judge people? How does that affect you?
Actually, this is the beauty of travel, because I think travel affects people in many ways, and the most significant way, I think, is that when you travel, you will begin to realize that although the other person looks different, but actually they all want the same things that you want. Okay, they want food, they want shelter, they want safety, and then they want a better life for themselves, and then they want love, they want happiness. I mean, exactly like you.
Yeah.
Exactly like you. And the same blood that flows in their veins flows in your veins too. So if you're in trouble medically, their blood can actually save your life. So although they're black, they're nude, they're naked, they're dirty, they use cow dung mixed with ash to decorate their face. I mean, they're exactly like you. So physically, mentally, emotionally, they're exactly like you. But then if they are like you, why is it that you think you are special? You know, so this is what I learned, and this is what I think is one of the best effects of traveling. You travel and you see a lot of people that are different, you know, and you realize that they're all the same as you,
Yeah.
and then you become humble by this experience, you know, that you shouldn't be looking at people being different, because in this country, for example, you know, we've got all this bigotry, this racism. Actually, during your time, during my time, we never had this, and
Yeah.
I think this was all because politicians have come into the picture, and they have used racism, religion to sort of divide you.
Yes.
You know, so one day I hope this country will ban discussions of religion, or using religion as a political tool. You know,
Yes.
when that happens, I think we will all be,
Yeah.
we will all be on the right track. You know,
Correct.
at the moment, our differences are being highlighted by these politicians for their
Manufactured
own
by them.
purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Manufactured by them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, they go. I mean, what it is so easy actually to go and win votes.
Yeah.
If I'm a politician, I go to the kampong, you know, I put my
Yeah.
soapbox there, I stand on the soapbox, I say, you know, he's a Chinese, you know, you're a Malay, you know, he's against you, and therefore you must join me, and I will protect you. You know, this is the kind of nonsense these people are preaching, you know. So I think one of the things that we need to do is maybe make it illegal to use race, religion as a, you know, as an instrument for politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what we should be doing one of these days, you
Yes.
know, in order to, and then also maybe we should no longer have political parties based on race, you know,
And
that
religion.
we made a law that all political parties must be multiracial.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know, maybe in the lifetime of our grandchildren, this might happen, you know,
Yep.
but I don't know.
Yep.
Those are my pet peeves. You know, these politicians are the ones who
Yep.
have divided us. Whereas if you go and travel around the world, I
Yeah.
mean, everybody's the same. You know,
Yep.
why do you think that you are different? You're superior. You're just because you're white,
Mm.
you're better than the black, you know, or better than the brown. You know, this is all politics and bigotry. You know,
Always in the name of race and religion, and
yes,
then openly stealing away from their religion and race. It's
yes.
incredible.
This you know, sadly, this is
Yeah.
what our politicians are, and until and unless I think this will go away,
Yeah.
because with education, with increasing standards of living, you know, then we can see through all this nonsense, you know, like the middle class, for example,
Mhm.
not too many of them are racist, you know,
Yeah.
because at the moment they are racist because they are in the class that are benefiting from
Yeah.
these policies.
Yes.
If you are, you know, benefiting from something, it's actually quite difficult for you to
Like
you
it.
know, to dismantle that system, you see.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yusuf, what countries you have not been to? You have gone to 143, but I'd like to know what countries you have never been to.
You'll be surprised.
Yes, I think
Surprisingly,
so.
I'm embarrassed to say it, actually, I've never been to Canada.
Okay. Oh, you don't want to go to Canada? It's boring.
Yeah, at the moment I don't see anything that's interesting in Canada
The national
that
parks, I think the national parks will be good.
so if I do go, I would go to the Canadian Arctic, you know,
Yeah.
where the polar bears are, and all the ice, the, you know, the mountains, the ice capes, and all that, and the Rockies, and part of the Rockies in the south of Canada. You know, those are what I would want to go. But I don't know. When I was in the UK working, I mean, every time there was a need to go to Canada, uh, all my Masale colleagues were fighting over themselves, you know, to go. You know, so I said, okay, you go, you go. I'm not particularly keen on going anyway. You know, so you go.
Besides Canada, what other countries?
That's about it. Huh? Of course,
Okay.
if you talk about some of the small islands like
Okay, of course.
in the Pacific and all that, you know, I mean, those are very difficult to reach.
Of course.
You've
Yeah.
got to really make an effort to go to those places.
Mm.
But for the moment, we don't go to countries just for the sake of adding the number of countries that you've visited. You know, I go because there are things those areas that I want to see.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Patagonia,
Yes.
I've
Yes.
been going
Patagonia.
back to Patagonia so many times. Antarctica, I've been going back and forth about 7 times. The Arctic, I mean, Greenland, Svalbard, Wrangel Island, I've been going up and down many times,
Yeah.
because I love the environment, the icy environment,
Yeah.
I love it so much, So I've been going back, back and forth. I never get tired of it. They say that if you drink iceberg melt, I've got a picture here which
Mm.
shows me collecting water from melting iceberg. If you drink iceberg melt, you are condemned to return
Wow.
forever and ever, again and again, to the place where you drank the water.
And it's been proven truth.
Yeah, it is true as far as I'm concerned. Maybe I went purposely to drink it.
So in all these many trips to Antarctica, did you notice personally the impact of this climate change we've all of us have heard about, but never really experienced it directly?
Yes, unfortunately, in the Arctic, for example, in the Arctic, the attraction of going to the Arctic is to see the polar bears. Polar bears feed on floating ice.
Mhm.
And as a result of global warming, uh, this ice melts. The ones which are nearer or further south are melting uh, earlier. So in order for the polar bear to go and hunt their meal, their lunch, which is basically seals, they have to go on the ice, and then when the seals come up to rest, then they ambush the seals from the water. You see?
Mhm.
So now this floating ice is further and further out in the open sea. So that's okay because polar bears can survive on those conditions. But what happens is that when they want to get back to land to go to their denning sites, because they give birth in their caves, then they have to swim a longer distance. And when that happens, then some of them die because today in the world, scientists, polar bear scientists, have estimated there are only about 25,000 polar bears left. And almost every country abutting the Arctic Ocean have banned the killing of polar bears. Russia, for example, banned the killing of polar bears way back in 1957.
Mhm.
But today, only 3 countries in the world are still hunting polar bears. The biggest culprit is the US, and then Canada. And that's one reason I don't want to go to Canada. And also Greenland. But Greenland, they're hunting very, very small numbers, maybe 4, 5, 10 at the most. But in Canada and the US, they are shooting for sport
Crazy.
750 polar bears every year.
My God.
So when I went to Greenland, when I went to Svalbard, when I went to Wrangel Island, I normally bring some polar bear experts,
Mhm.
because people like Morten Jorgensen, Nikita Osyanikov. Nikita was actually the Russian deputy director of the polar bear sanctuary on Wrangel Island. So they normally come on the trips I organize as expert guides. When we are on the ship at night, they give us talks. So from Nikita and from Morten has written a book, "The Plight of the Polar Bears." While they're being decimated, while management countries are arguing among themselves, because a lot of the subpopulation of polar bears in the Arctic are in the American and the Canadian sector. So because there are a lot of them there, the Americans say it's okay for us to kill
Mhm.
because there's so many. So
Yeah.
they dispute the fact that there are 25,000 left. They say there may be 50,000.
Mhm.
But these polar bear scientists have been counting.
Yeah.
They've got collars, and
Yeah.
they track the movements of these bears. And in the US, what is happening is that only the Inuits, the local Eskimos,
Yes.
have got the right to
Mhm.
shoot these polar bears because it's been their traditional right.
Yeah.
And they use the skin for warmth and the meat for food.
Mhm.
But these days, if you go to an Inuit village, anywhere in Alaska and so on, even in Greenland, you can see that, they've got a supermarket in their village. There's no need for them to go and hunt polar bears anymore. So what do? They auction their license to the highest bidder.
Right.
So American sports hunters go up to the Inuit and say, "Sell me your license." So each of the license to shoot polar bears, they earn about 150,000, 100,000. So they sell these licenses, and sports people sport shooters from mainly the US will buy these licenses, and they go and shoot.
Yeah.
And your Donald Trump, I think about a couple of years ago, um, allowed, or rather made it legal for these hunters to actually hunt polar bears from the helicopter.
My God.
I mean, what kind of a sport
Yeah.
is that? No, you sit
Yeah.
on the helicopter,
Mm.
you hover over the bear, and then you just shoot the fellow, and then you tie the fellow up under your helicopter, and you bring him back. And you pay $150,000 for that privilege.
Yeah.
So I think these are some of the things that Americans especially should actually highlight, that their government is allowing this to happen. And by doing this, at the rate of attrition of about 750 polar bears every year, within about a decade or a decade and a half, polar bears will be extinct, which is why you need to go to the Arctic
Now.
as soon as possible. Because even now, it's getting increasingly difficult to spot polar bears.
Yeah.
You've got to go right out into the sea, as far away from, for example, the first polar bear we spotted when we were in Svalbard was about 900 kilometers from the North Pole already, you see, at latitude 82 degrees. Yeah, that's when the ice was still there. Those days, you can actually see them even in Svalbard itself.
Oh.
Now there's very few. So if you really want to go and see polar bears, you go to Wrangel Island, for example, in Russia, in the Russian Arctic, because Wrangel Island was where my friend Nikita Ozyanikov used to be the deputy director for that polar bear sanctuary. Wrangel Island is special because there are about 300 polar bear denning sites, caves where they raise their young. So if you want to see polar bears, actually Wrangel Island is the place. Or you can go to a place in Alaska, where this things just come into the town and they're dirty and skinny and they're a nuisance actually.
Scavenging for food.
They're hungry. Yeah.
Yusuf, you know that a lot of Malaysians have followed you on your organized trips to these far-off places which they can only dream of. No tour operators in Malaysia organize that kind of trip. Do you see that more and more Malaysians are prepared to try out something adventurous, something that's out of the way as part of their interest now?
I see this happening because when I first started organizing this kind of workshops, I'm a photographer, so I teach photography on these workshops. In the let's say 2010, 2011, 12, most of the participants of my workshops were basically foreigners, Europeans, Americans, Australians, But since about the 2016, 2015, I see more and more of the local people going, and younger people, because normally on the cruises or expedition ships that go to Antarctica, you see 60-year-old, people, not very many young people. But now, more and more of the younger people are actually going to these places. They are willing to spend this amount of money. Because going to Antarctica is extremely expensive. It costs you maybe about average about 14,000 US for a 2-week trip. So it's about almost $1,000 a day.
But it's
it's
worth spending because if we don't see them now, it will just disappear. They will just go away, and it will just be memories of pictures
Yes.
that you see from the
Yeah.
internet, it will
Yes.
be very sad because that the time is really running out
Yes.
for us. And that you were supposed to go to Regular Island this year, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I in fact lost a bit of money because I already paid for
Mm,
tickets for me and my wife to to lead a group
mhm.
to go there. We had I think about 20 odd
Yeah.
people from the Philippines, from Australia, from Singapore. There were a couple from Hong Kong and
Mhm.
some couple from Turkey. I think about 3 Americans, that sort of thing. And we already paid for our tickets, um, but the cost of the trip, we could actually postpone it. We told
Mhm.
the ship people that since we cannot go, the
Mhm.
ship cannot sail,
Yeah.
we will postpone it to next year. But the Russian airline, the UTAIR,
Yeah.
the tickets is $14,000 for me and my wife.
Okay.
They are still flying,
Mm,
despite of COVID and all that,
okay.
because
Oh.
Anadir, the place where you should go to board the icebreaker to
Uh-huh.
go to Wrangel Island, is actually a remote Russian town,
Okay.
and this flight from Russia, from Moscow, goes there once every 2 days. You see,
Okay.
so it's a vital communication link. So they cannot close it down.
Mhm.
So since they're flying, when I tried to claim the money back from them, they say, "Hey, we are still flying. It's just that you didn't turn up, so I
Oh
cannot
my
refund your
God.
money."
Uh,
So we had to resort to claiming it from the insurance. Some
okay.
people managed to get their money back from insurance,
Mhm.
but I can't. I didn't. I couldn't.
Yeah.
My insurance wouldn't give it to me.
I might think there are a number of tickets that are still left hanging in the air for me. Uh,
There you are. Is
I
it?
paid my money to the Ethiopian tour operator.
Uh,
The operator has been kind enough to still keep in touch with me because if it's just cut off communications with me, there's really nothing I can do. Okay,
yes.
the airline is not flying, but it's not so much the money. I think it's the frustration of being caught in Malaysia, that caught in the sense that we are not able to go anywhere, and there are so many plans, so much things that I want to do, and I look at it like, look, I can't hold on anymore. I just need to get out. Okay, so I really hope that they will make this vaccine available soon, that we can travel at some point or another. Okay, now, Yusuf, we are running out of time. It's amazing. We have spent almost an hour talking with you.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we can talk and talk for hours. It will never end, okay? Because it's something that we really like. Okay, now, Yusuf, when this thing is open, transboundary is open again, we can afford to travel again. What will be your first destination?
I I owe 2 or 3 groups a trip to Antarctica, to Wrangel Island, and also to South Georgia to go and see the king penguins and the
Okay.
emperor penguins. So these were all pre-arranged. I was supposed to go to Wrangel Island in July,
Mhm.
and in the southern summer, I was supposed to go to South Georgia. You go to South Georgia from the Falklands, take a ship there, and then you sail southwards towards the pole to South Georgia. So that one is already on, but suspended. And
Mm.
then I also had a trip planned for Patagonia.
Mhm.
So there are 3 or 4 that are in midair. So I'm a bit frustrated, staying at home. But I've been making myself useful. I finished 3 or 4 little books, to about Antarctica, about Svalbard. Instead of sitting at home, I do this kind of books.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this one as well. This is Svalbard, this is Antarctica. So I've done about 3 or 4 of this.
Okay,
And
this published by you.
yes, because nowadays, I mean,
Okay.
it is so easy to
Yeah.
publish
Yes.
books online.
Okay.
You go to places like Blurb, for example, or Photobook. Right now, Photobook has got a lot of promotions. You
Okay.
can buy, a voucher for as little as 50 to 70 ringgit
Okay.
to print one of these books. But
Yes.
you got to learn the software.
Okay.
So you upload it, then they send it to you.
I must buy
So,
these
so
books
I
from
did
you.
it. So
Please keep it for me. Please keep it for me. I must buy from you. Okay. Now, this you know that
can.
you have I mean, you are a fantastic salesman. Okay, I know. Okay, yeah, I have been thinking of your trips to Rangoon Island. It's really amazing. Now, I hope that for those of you who have been watching this program, I want to say thank you, Yusuf, for just spending time with us, and that you must watch the pictures taken by Yusuf on the internet, and the videos that he has taken is really, really marvelous. It's fantastic. Okay, and I think that as Yusuf says that the money is not yours until you spend it. Don't save it for anyone but yourself. And that while we are still able to walk, while we're able to run, go for these trips. Okay, I think it's really worthwhile, and to open our eyes, and most important, to open our hearts. I think that's very important. Thank you, Yusuf. We hope to catch up again and talk about traveling again soon. And to all my followers, remember to like, follow, and share RealChunWai. And of course, Yusuf too.
Thank you, Tato.
Okay, bye-bye.
My pleasure. Good night.